You're very welcome. Today's Hibernian Talks with our host, Chris Noonan. Today, Tim Noonan. I'm looking at Chris Cook. I apologize, Tim. Today, with our host, Noonan. Joining us today, the author of The Yank, or just simply Yank, John Crawley. Tim?
Thanks, Danny. Um, Felcha and go home, August, John. Pleasure having you on as our guest today. Um, the book, The Yank, has just come out, I believe, 2 weeks ago. Is that right? When
About
did
2 weeks ago, yeah.
About 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
Right. And well, it's congratulations. It's a big deal. It's your debut novel. Is that right?
Thank you very much. Well, it's a memoir more than a novel.
Sorry,
Yeah.
memoir.
It's okay.
So, what made you write the book? Why did you think this story was like worth telling, or that people would be interested in the story?
Well, it wasn't that I thought people would be interested, as people told me they were interested. See, I actually wrote a novel. I spent about 3 years working on a novel. Somebody from my background, because of the clandestine nature of the IRA, writing a memoir isn't the first thing that comes to mind. And it's something I never anticipated doing or imagined I would do. But when I was talking to publishers, especially in America, and there was one fellow there, he was a screenwriter, and they thought the novel was okay, but they were saying, you're a first-time writer, fiction, and it's not, but your story is the story that will sell, because you have a very interesting story. Having been in the Marines, having worked on the arms thing, having operated in England, having been in jail several times, and just from my general, involvement in the IRA over the years. But so I went around and I canvassed some Republicans, and I actually got a very, I thought the reaction would be, don't do a memoir. You can't, you can't say anything in a memoir, like, and but the reaction was very good. People were saying, certain aspects of the story need to be told, and it's about time some of it was told. So I wrote 3 chapters of a memoir, and I met Richard O'Raw. I'm sure many of your viewers will be familiar with Richard and his book on the blanket and other books. He's former blanket man. He was PRO for the hunger strikers during the hunger strikes. And I showed him the 3 chapters, and unbeknownst to me, he sent them to 2 publishers, and I had a contract a week later. So basically, I did my best to write a memoir that would not incriminate me or anybody else. Like, it's not a kiss and tell. I don't name names or anything like that, but I describe incidents that are mostly a matter of public, in the public domain. Incidents I was caught on, like the Marina Ann, where I was working in Boston with Whitey Bulger, people like that. That's public knowledge. And so I think I've managed to accomplish that. But it's early days. It's only out 2 weeks, but so far there seems to be tremendous interest, and I'm getting a lot of interviews in Ireland, and a lot of media interest here, and it's in America too. I've got some very good reviews in some American magazines and different periodicals and publications, and better than I expected, actually. So, but like I said, it's 2 weeks. It's early days, and we'll see how it develops.
Great. Now, did it come out earlier in Ireland, or does it?
No, it came out the same day. I think it was September 6th in the United States. In Ireland, it's published by Merrion House. And Merrion House Press would be the biggest publisher in Ireland of Troubles-related books.
Topics.
And Melville House in the United States. I believe they're based in New York.
Okay, very good. So, now again, back to the story on the book. So, just to kind of quickly, quick outline. You were born here in the United States, is that right?
I was born in the United States to Irish immigrant parents. My father was from County Roscommon. My mother was from County Kerry. My father was in the U.S. Air Force at the time. He had joined it at the time, you could accelerate American citizenship by joining the U.S. military. I don't know if that's still the case. And he wanted a bit of technical training. And he spent 4 years in the American Air Force. He was at a base in Long Island, New York, I believe, when I was born. But we moved to Chicago when I was about 2. So I don't remember New York, from that time. And when I was 13, we took a summer trip to Ireland, and when I was 14, we moved back, and I went to school here. They don't call it high school here, but it would have been the American equivalent of high school. When I was just before my 18th birthday, I went back to the States. I joined the U.S. Marines. I volunteered for Marine Recon. I became an instructor. Had several meritorious promotions and made sergeant in 3 years. And I got out of the Marines on the 29th of May, 1979 at 8 o'clock in the morning, and at 2 that afternoon, I was in connecting flight for Ireland to go home and join the IRA.
Oh, there. And that's kind of where the story goes from there, right?
More or less, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's where the story goes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, very good. So, what does the IRA? What did the IRA mean to you as a child growing up here in the States, and then what did it mean to you going, at school in Ireland? Basically, what was it that made you be interested in the IRA, and two, feel that you could actually contribute?
Well, there wasn't anything in particular about the IRA that interested me when I was a kid in the States. I remember, hearing about the Troubles, 1969, 1970 kicking off, and it was all about Catholics and Protestants fighting each other, and the British Army was in the middle, keeping the warring sides apart. And I didn't learn until later that the British were responsible for the warring sides in the first place. And but what really sort of shaped my thinking was growing up in an American republic. I mean, I grew up in a republic. I grew up in a nation of nations, in a very diverse country with countless ethnic groups and cultures and diversity. But as it says in the American seal, e pluribus unum, from many one. From all that diversity, from all that ethnic groupings, you had one loyalty to one national republic. I mean, yet, like in India, you have, India is a republic, 2.1 billion people, 5,000 ethnic groups, over 15 official languages, but it's one republic. We had a situation in Ireland where we have a country that's with the population half the size of London, with two basic traditions, and we can't come together as one republic because basically one small minority faction has its supremacy being underwritten by a foreign power, the British government. But again, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here. I don't know. If they still do the Pledge of Allegiance in America?
Yeah,
they do, right? But I mean, I probably was a sincere fella, and reciting that resonated with me. Things like the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I believed Ireland should have the same thing. And from my reading, I mean, I did a lot of reading when I was in the Marines. I'm a voracious reader anyway, and even from a young age, I preferred history and politics to fiction. And when I was a young teenager in Ireland, there's an avalanche of counter-Republican, anti-Republican propaganda constantly in the media. But getting away to America and getting away from that avalanche of anti-Republican, propaganda, I was able to get the space to read and study and form my own opinions. And the more I studied and the more I read and the more I analyzed it, the more I came to the conclusion that, the right thing to do was to be an Irish Republican. Now, once you believe that, you basically have three choices when I came home to Ireland. Either I stand idly by, I actively collaborate, or I resist. And I made my decision.
Oh, very good. Did you feel since you were in the Marine Corps and that there would be kind of allegiances that would be challenging between the two?
Well, I didn't really think about that. I didn't think there should be. I didn't see why, maybe a U.S. Marine being an American Republican should rule out being an Irish Republican.
Right.
I was a Republican. Republicanism is an international philosophy anyway. I mean, the French Republicans came to help. The Americans came to help when the French Republicans came to help Ireland. There's an international Republican ethos, and it's And so I didn't see that there was an antagonism there. I thought if you supported, the right of the founding fathers of the United States to fight the British to achieve a national republic in America, then why would you not support the Irish people's right to have a national republic in Ireland?
Right. So very good, very good. Now there's you cover a lot when you're about basic training and Marine Corps and that, and it's tell me about like what was the rigors of the Marine Corps training that really kind of that you had to kind of bear through in order to get to the other side.
The first chapter, it's all in the first chapter, but it's kind of a long chapter, all right. And it was my intention at first to join the U.S. Army Special Forces because my cousin Ken had been in the Green Berets for 7 years. But my granduncle Mike had emigrated from Kerry, and he had served he'd been drafted in the U.S. Navy in World War II. He was in the Pacific, and he had a real reverence for the Marine Corps, having had them on his ships and all. So he's telling me, if you want to join the military and you want to do it right, the Marines that's the only way to go, in his opinion. So even though I was very close to joining the Army, I went to see a Marine recruiter, and I said, I'd like to be in Special Forces, and you don't have Special Forces. And he started telling me, oh no, we have the best Special Forces of all, Marine recon. And he gave me the whole spiel. So I describe in the book how I ended up joining the Marines. I talk about boot camp, and I remember one of the incidents in boot camp, a loose thread in boot camp is called an Irish pennant in the Navy and the Marines, an Irish pennant,
Mm-hmm.
So the drill instructors, if they found an Irish pennant, they would always say, are you from Ireland, maggot? Of course, no, sir, I'm not. We'll get on your face, But they came to me, and they found a loose thread in one of my buttons, and the drill instructor said, are you from Ireland, maggot? I said, sir, yes, sir. And he said, what was that? Sir, the private lives in Dublin, Ireland, sir. And he said, Ireland, what part of Russia is that? And I had to get that. Give me 500, well, whatever, 50 push-ups, whatever.
Yeah.
But then I found, whereas the Army was willing to give me guarantees to go to airborne, ranger, and special forces training, no guarantee you'll make it. Most people don't, but guarantee they'll send you. The Marines wouldn't do that. So getting into recon was a bit of a convoluted process, but I finally got there, and I ended up an instructor. And I go into all that in the book,
Yeah, very good. Yeah, yeah. And I just want to make, because I think there are a lot of people, there's a lot of interest from American from the American military audience that would be interested in your
Sure.
experience.
Well, I mean, any of them reading that will get it,
Yeah, right. I figured they would. So why? So you went in through the military training and everything, and with the desire to go back to Ireland, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And did you think you were going to be able to get picked up, or do you think the Republican movement would accept you as coming in from America?
I had no idea. I thought, they might see me as an adventurer. They might see me as a plant or a spy. They might see me as somebody, as I say in the book, looking for a sense of purpose instead of what I was somebody with a sense of purpose. But I eventually got in. I mean, as I say in the book as well, how do you join the secret army when you don't know nobody in it? It wasn't called a secret army for nothing. But eventually I found a fella who was who'd been in Portlaoise prison, a Republican prisoner, but he'd left the IRA, and he was just working fixing up a building, and I got to work with him, and he rapidly gasped my attention. And he actually tried to talk me out of it, but eventually I persisted, and eventually I was approached by a Tyrone fella who was in the IRA, and went through a bit of a few weeks of interviews and checking out my background and my family history. And it wasn't really relevant, but my granduncle on my father's side had been in the IRA in Roscommon in the Tan War. He'd actually shot the last RAC man in the Tan War on the day the truce was signed. And he took the Republican side in the Civil War, but he ended up joining the Guards when De Valera came in. So it was an interesting historical anecdote, but there was no particular hotbed of Republican propaganda or anything like that. I literally developed my own views and my own thinking from my own study and my own belief system. And nobody encouraged me in it.
Now, when you moved back to Ireland, did you move down to Kerry or to Roscommon or to some place else?
When I came back to Ireland, we were living in Dublin.
Ah, okay.
My parents had moved to Dublin. Yeah, I lived in Roscommon for a while, but they'd moved to Dublin. And so I was in Dublin, and I had to go down the country to get this job for a while, where I met the guy but that's why I specifically got the job, because I knew the guy had been in prison, and I wanted to work my way in there, sort of, and see could I get into the IRA. But I had no idea if I would get in. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's taking a gamble after all you went through the boot camp and everything else, and your active duty with the Marine Corps. Did you see any active duty? Were you like at any campaigns and all with the Marine Corps?
No, the Vietnam War ended literally in April '75, and I joined in May '75 because that's when I was 18. And I got out in '79. So the only active duty I saw was in Ireland.
There you go. And you were shipped out there. What did your parents think about you thinking going to the Marine Corps and your family?
Well, I didn't. Well, my father often said, "Don't ever do anything in life that look back and regret you didn't do it." And he was okay with me joining the Marines. And when I was in the Marines, and again I say it in the book. I mean, I had an offer. They wanted to send me to the Presidio in Monterey, California, to learn Chinese. And then I refused to do that. And then because I didn't want to make it a career. And then I actually had an offer to go to the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis. And I described that. But again, I didn't want to make it a career. So I didn't think there was any point doing that if I was going to go home to Ireland. So I had a lot of opportunities. But, as far as I'm concerned, the greatest opportunity that I got and the greatest honor of my life was to have been an IRA volunteer. Now, my parents didn't know my intention. And in fact, it was only years later, when I was first arrested, that the special branch went to their house and told them I was arrested. And they had a very, very difficult time convincing them that it was me, because they were saying, well, our son's, an ex-Marine. There's no way he could be in the IRA, and you've got the wrong guy. And see, nobody knew. I mean, my parents didn't know I was involved, nothing like that. And if I had my way, nobody would have ever known I was involved, and I wouldn't have been writing any memoir, because if things went okay, nobody should have ever known I was in it. But the trouble is, there was informers, so one thing led to another. And here I am writing a memoir.
I talked with some guy in Chicago. So now for I think as you discussed in the book about how the IRA was organized, they have like local branches overall.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Well, the ultimate Army authority, what we call the Army authority, is a general convention where all the IRA member delegates get together, but that can't really be held in wartime so much because of the obvious security dangers. But generally, the Army Convention appoints a 12-man executive, and a 7-man IRA Army Council is chosen from that 12 men, and they oversee the day-to-day operations. Under the Army Council, there's a GHQ, General Headquarters, and you have different departments: training, finance, education, operations, intelligence, security, and various departments like that. And then under that, you have various command areas, and then you have your active service unit, which would be the core group of men and women who are actually carrying out armed operations.
Was it like an overall game plan? All right, we need to say, for example, what's going on in the Ukraine, about like going, about getting the Crimea, going after, battle after battle and trying to gain territory and that sort of stuff. But
no, I don't see. It was surprisingly ad hoc. I never really saw any strategy. I thought there would have been, but it seemed to be like, take a bite out of the Brits and keep chewing, But, I never really, as long as I was in it, and, I never really detected, a strategy. Now, there was people there who were quite capable of developing strategies that I thought would have been, good strategies, but they never seemed to come to the fore, But on the whole, no, I wouldn't say that there was an overarching military strategy, except, to fight a war of attrition. And, really, when you're fighting a war of attrition, you don't really have a strategy, because attrition isn't really a strategy, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But we were always hoping, things would improve. And, you see, here's the thing. It's hard because we were so compartmentalized. Sorry, I can usually pronounce that, but my mouth's pretty dry. Sorry.
Yeah.
Because of that, you couldn't really see the big picture. So
Right.
you're always kind of hoping something bigger was coming down we were going to get resources. We were going to get, the capacity in the form of weapons and that, to improve things and advance things. So you were always hoping this was in the mix, and all you could do in the meantime was just do your best until, things took a turn for the better, really.
Yeah.
From our perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you I think you discussed in the book as well. I know you discussed the book that this is an all volunteer army that actually was a all volunteer part-time army because they actually had jobs and things else, right?
Very, very few people were full-time, and I one of the things that I thought was a major flaw was that we didn't have more full-time people, full-time active service units, and train them more professionally, because there was a real amateurishness there as well. See, very, very few people in the IRA had any professional military training whatsoever. And even though there were a number, they never seemed to, like, the IRA could have easily done a skills audit, put people together and got them to train people more professionally. But for some reason, that was never done. So, but I have to make something clear. I didn't join the IRA coming from the Marines with some view that I was going to, change the IRA for the better and improve things. I really believed that the IRA was this very professional, very sophisticated organization that I kept hearing about. But I kept hearing it from the Brits more than anybody. It was the Brits who were saying that the IRA was this this professional, sophisticated organization. But when I was actually in it, and even though I met some fantastic men and some brilliant operators and some, I mean, I know people who are involved in stuff they would have got the Medal of Honor if they're in any other army in the world. You know what I mean?
Right.
But and look at it. Where would you get, like, the 12 men died in hunger strike, 10 in the blocks, and and 2 in England? I mean, where do you get the caliber of people like that who'll starve themselves out for principle? So we had extraordinary people, but we didn't never seem to get it to gel in the way that I believed it could.
And you think that with your military training that would have been helpful, but you probably didn't know that at the point when you were.
I didn't know that at the point I joined.
Yeah.
I only joined the Marines for my own professional development and to test my commitment. See, I probably would have joined the IRA when I was 18 because I was always very sympathetic, but I didn't know anybody in the IRA. So I thought, I'll go to America, I'll join the military, I'll come back, and if I still have the commitment to do it, then I'll know that I'm serious. And like I said, I got out of the Marines at 8 a.m. I was on a plane home for Ireland 2 that afternoon. So, I did. I was motivated. I was motivated, but
Yeah.
I have to say, not fanatical. I was motivated.
Yeah. And also you were young.
young, and idealistic. And now I'm old and idealistic. So
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So now the sorry, I'm just wondering. Now, did you think that when you joined the IRA, did you think there was that a united Ireland was imminent, or do you think that it was further away? Where did you see yourself in the arc of Ireland?
Well, you see, it's important when we talk about a united Ireland. United, yes, but we were the Republican Army. We weren't the United Ireland Army, and I don't want this that sound like a semantic or pedantic distinction, but I mean, partition was only 100 years old, so sometimes we get wrapped up a little bit, our own people, in this thing that the struggle for Irish freedom was just United Ireland. Ireland was geographically united in 1916 when there was a rising. Ireland was geographically united in 1791 when the United Irishmen were formed. And what did the United Irishmen mean by United Ireland? They meant a joint civic identity, a national unity that would across the sectarian divide. So while we wanted a united Ireland, the goal was that it was united as a republic, and not simply united, for the sake of being united. You know what I mean? Because Ireland was united for most of it. I mean, the British ran United Ireland for hundreds and hundreds of years. Unionists after the plantations lived in United Ireland quite happily for hundreds of years. It's only when we start talking about an independent republic and getting rid of sectarian supremacy that people started getting upset.
And that's kind of where the kind of the struggle became, because it was I think you had mentioned that there were a lot of Protestants in the struggle for an independent Ireland as well.
There are many Protestant patriots over the years, and in fact, United Irishmen, which were you see, before the United Irishmen in 1791 were formed, traditional Irish nationalism was about getting a Catholic king to rule Ireland. It was like a Catholic struggle. And the United Irishmen were the first ones to bring in the concept of an independent Irish republic, sovereign in its own right, free from England. And if you look back to the Battle of Boyne and things like that, it was the Catholic King James against the Protestant King William and all that. So it was a sectarian thing. And when the United Irishmen were formed, of the 28 members of founding fathers of United Irishmen, 26 were Northern Presbyterians and 2 were Anglicans, Wolfe Tone and Thomas Russell. And I'm sure most people in the Irish community in America would have heard of Wolfe Tone.
There you go. Yeah.
So it's ironically we had it's the way things work, and it's the way sometimes the Brits are able to shape the strategic environment. But we had a Protestant leadership in 1798 rebellion, and almost no Catholic base, until the rebellion actually hit. And then in 1916, we had a Catholic Republican leadership with almost no Protestant base. So the whole thing really is to unite Ireland under the common name of Irishmen, like you have in America. I mean, I grew up in America, and you didn't know or care what somebody's religion was.
Yeah.
At least, I mean, I didn't experience that. So we have to get away from that in Ireland. And when we talk about unity, I think we have to talk about the unity as citizenship, because under the present Good Friday Agreement, all they're talking about you can still be British, or you can still be Irish, and so that sectarian dynamic is maintained, which was against the Republican principles that I believe we fought for. But
So getting back to the book, from the standpoint of, so you went to Ireland, and you then became involved in the Republican struggle.
Yeah.
Then you were sent to America, right? Well, I'll let you talk about that.
Well, one of the first demoralizing things that occurred to me was when I was sent to America to get guns, because Martin McGuinness, I'm sure many of you heard of him, was a top IRA leader at the time, and apparently he felt that the only asset that I could provide to the movement was that I had an American accent, which would have been a lot stronger then, probably. So he said, go over and you can go into gun shops, you can buy guns and things like that, and because you have an American accent, you're not going to get noticed like an Irish accent would. And I kind of argued my case that, look, I was in a special operations unit in the Marines, and I was an instructor, and I thought I could provide more. I had more to offer the IRA than simply my accent. But no, that was it. No other interest, literally no other interest than in my accent. So at first I refused to go, and because I thought it was ridiculous. Yeah. And then I more or less was given the option, well, go, or you can't remain in the organization. And I didn't want to resign, so I had to go. Right. So I was given a $5 bill cut in an erratic manner, and I was told the other guy in Boston had the other half. I was to meet him, and then he put me in touch with various people. So we had to buy guns, and we had to get false ID and things like that, which means you had to have somebody who's willing to cut corners, and so that's how we first got in touch with Whitey Bulger. But I have to say that at the time I had never heard of Jim Bulger. I know nothing about him. I mean, now with the movies and the books and all the stuff in hindsight, but I wasn't from Boston. I'd never been in Boston. I never heard of this guy. He just struck me as a plausible businessman who was willing to cut corners and provide us with resources.
There you go. And then you were going to bring them back through a boat,
yes.
Right?
Yes. So eventually, we it's in the book, but we eventually got a boat called the Valhalla to bring it to an Irish fishing vessel called the Marina, 200 miles off the Irish coast. But there was an informer involved, Sean O'Callaghan, on the Irish end, and we were arrested, and the weapons were seized, and I got 10 years in jail.
Actually, if you don't mind, maybe we could kind of touch a little bit on the travels on the boat. There's a section in your book, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'll read you a section. It's just about it's not too long, and it's just about some of the rough weather we had. Will I read it now?
Yes, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Sure. About halfway across the ocean, we had a day when the sea was like glass. I never saw calmer water, not even on a fishing pond. The wake from the Valhalla caused the only ripple in the utter tranquility of the benign Atlantic. I had no idea I was experiencing the proverbial calm before the storm. That night, the winds began to build and the sea churned. Bob grew concerned. He told me that a hurricane he'd been monitoring in the Bahamas was coming up the Gulf Stream and heading in our direction. That's all I needed to hear. I'm not a superstitious man, but I couldn't help thinking back to the night before we departed from Gloucester. Patney and Joe Murray had taken me out for a meal in a fancy restaurant near Boston. I had steak and lobster. It doesn't get better than that in my book. Returning to Joe's Chevy Blazer, I climbed into the back and discovered my watch had slipped off my wrist. I thought it strange I hadn't noticed it falling off. It was a Seiko diver's watch I bought in Okinawa after I qualified at scuba school in the Philippines. We didn't have time to go back and look for it. I bought an inexpensive replacement the next morning. That watch had been through thick and thin with me, from Marine recon training in Asia and America to gun battles with the British Army in Ireland. It held real sentimental value. I joked to Pat that the watch may have abandoned me because it saw real danger ahead. Noting the unease in Bob's face as he talked about the approaching storm, I remembered my quip and shuddered. Shortly afterwards, all hell broke loose. The hurricane seemed to be taking its residual violence out on us. For the rest of the day and all that night, our lives hung in the balance. Valhalla wasn't designed for the battering it received. Enormous waves dwarfed the boat. Bob estimated them to be 40 to 50 feet high. Ferocious winds, driving rain, and crashing seas swept the deck, making any venture outside the pilot house extremely hazardous. Bob told me it was the worst weather he'd seen in 25 years fishing the North Atlantic. The boat reeled violently from side to side, its stabilizing outriggers almost touching the surface with each roll. I thought they would go under on several occasions, and we would be flipped completely upside down. John and I went out to the main deck at the urging of Bob to check on something. I cannot remember the reason, but as we stood less than 2 feet apart, a chain from the starboard outrigger ripped a steel cleat violently from its mooring. The cleat flew between our heads, missing us by inches. Had it hit one of us, it would have meant certain decapitation. We took turns in the wheel, attempting to keep the Valhalla on course. When my turn came, I struggled to maintain the heading Bob had given me. Walls of cold, dark water made endless attempts to swamp us. The ferocity of the storm and the unrelenting terror of being plunged to the bottom of the Atlantic frayed all our nerves. It was the middle of the night when my watch ended, and I handed the wheel to Bob. That, it would turn out, saved our lives. I retired to my bunk and lay there out of the way. The other men were doing the same. There was nothing else for it. As we rocked wildly from side to side, sleep was impossible. I wondered if my family would ever learn what became of me when the Atlantic finally swallowed us. About 20 minutes after handing the wheel to Bob, an enormous wave landed an almost knockout blow to the boat. There was the sound of a massive crash, and I was thrown forward violently. It felt like a car collision. I stumbled from my berth to a chilling sight. 4 of the Valhalla's 7 tempered glass windows had been blown in. Bob was on his knees with blood gushing from a head wound caused by broken glass. He was trying desperately to hold on to the wheel while John rendered him assistance. Water had poured into the pilot house and down into the forward engine room, causing a short circuit and starting a fire. Smoke poured up from the engine room where the guns and ammunition were stored. Seawater sloshed around my ankles. I knew at that moment we were doomed. I rushed over to Bob and John. There was blood everywhere. Head wounds can sometimes look worse than they are, and I hoped this was the case. Otherwise, Bob would be the first of us to die that night. To my immense relief, however, Bob was lucid and able to function. John did his best to clean and dress Bob's wounds, while I kept my hands on the wheel, trying to steer us into the waves so we didn't get broadsided. There was so much damage to the boat, and the storm was so fierce and persistent. I could not conceive of us evading catastrophe for much longer. I asked Bob if we should put on the survival suits we had brought along. There's no point, he gasped painfully. We're in the middle of the ocean. We have no communications. Nobody knows we're here. Go ahead and put it on if you want to. but it'll take you 8 hours longer to die. None of us put them on.
Yeah, it's quite a harrowing story. So
A fun trip.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yeah, it was no pleasure. It was more like it was no pleasure cruise. That's for sure.
No.
Now, tell me a little bit your writing style. I mean, how did you like? All right, now that you knew you were going to write a memoir, did you like? All right, now every day I'm gonna, from this time to this time I'm gonna write, or was it starts and fits, and did it take a long time to write?
It took me about a year, but you see, like I said, I wrote a novel, and a lot of the novel was semi-autobiographical anyway. So I was able to take chunks of the novel, like describing how I got out of prison and stuff like that, which was true, and transfer it. So that helped me like write it quicker. But basically, the Irish publisher, asked me to send him a chapter every week, which I did. And I remember I signed a contract for the book in August of last year, and they asked me to have the book with them for the 1st of January, which I did. And I think both publishers were quite surprised, because they both told me nobody's ever on time with a book ever. So yeah, I just put my shoulder to the wheel and wrote. And I'm not a writer. I mean, I don't have any training in writing. I never wrote before, but I didn't have, I wrote the book myself. I didn't have anybody helping me. The only thing in the book that I didn't write was the title of the Yank, which when I was telling the American publisher that some IRA volunteers used to sometimes refer to me as the Yank, and it annoyed me, not because of the name, but because I thought it identified me if they were in a bugged house or speaking in front of an informer. You know what I mean? It wasn't the smartest nickname to have, because it pinpointed me. But so he kind of like, he kind of latched onto that and says, "Oh, that'd be a good name for the book." And at first, I wasn't that keen on the name, but it seems to have worked out okay.
Yeah. It's actually, being American, I know we used to where we're visiting Ireland, we used to be called, the Yanks are here.
Yank,
so
Yank,
not necessarily is it insult, but it's not necessarily a compliment.
Oh, it's not an insult at all. But I mean, they don't get that. Sometimes people from Alabama don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Certainly. So you took you about a year to put it together. Did you go through?
I mean,
a lot
there
of
was editing and all. I mean, the normal. What I know now is the normal process of publishing, but I didn't know then. So even though I had the book finished last January, it was only published on the 6th of September. But that's to do with that's not because I wasn't ready, but that's to do with whatever publishing program they have for the year. I mean, they have a lot of books, and it wasn't just me.
Oh, okay. And then there was in the queue of books to be published.
Yeah.
So now, probably with COVID, you kind of were sequestered in the house, and you were able.
That helped a bit, actually. I mean, I hope nobody listened to this last time, because I don't mean it like that. But the close down allowed me to give me more time to write. Of course, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I think it was a lot. I think we'll probably see a lot of interesting things coming out. Because between music.
I got a funny feeling there's going to be an avalanche of stuff coming.
Yeah, I think so too. Now, where can you buy the book now? If someone's
I know in Ireland that the books and bookstores here, it's online. You can get it. You can get it from the publishers directly, Melville House or Marion Press. But I know it's on Amazon.
Yeah, I think it's Amazon Smile too. I think
Amazon Smile. Yeah, I found that. So one of the days last week, it actually made #1 bestseller in Irish history.
Oh,
okay. It slipped a bit, but we're only beginning really the publicity campaign in America. So hopefully it'll get back up there again.
So are you getting a lot of feedback from different
loads?
publishers?
Oh yeah, very good. Like there was and some very, very good reviews. See, I'm getting a bit of hostility in the press over here because they're anti-Republican here. I mean, you had years of censorship and all that, and all of a sudden, a proud, unrepentant Republican is sticking their head up, and they don't like it. But I'm pleasantly surprised at the American reaction. It's very, very good, and some of the reviews that I'm getting are excellent. And I was very pleasantly surprised. And even the New York Daily News did a review. A substantial review there about a week or two ago, and I'm told they have 6 million readers. And there's an American military magazine. They have 2 million readers. They did a very good review, and yeah, various things like that, and none of them have been like, this is a waste of time. Don't read it. Even where there's criticisms, because a lot of not everybody in America would support that we were fighting the British. Even where there might be political criticism, there was no criticism really of the book itself or of the writing or the story.
Okay.
But,
yeah,
but on the whole, there's been very little criticism.
It's a fascinating story. For a out of the gate novel. That's it's really a fantastic leap, because it's a page turner. And
Thanks. Well, a lot of people are saying to me, you need to write another one, but I've only had one life.
yeah,
I've kind of read it now. I don't know what am I gonna, what do I do now? Like,
right. Actually, that was a question I was going to ask for you. Do you have like a follow-up book, or do you have something?
no, well, nothing particularly in mind, but I could maybe polish up that novel, or a lot of people are telling me you need to write something. I will write something else, because I'm 65 now, and at the end of the day, what else am I going to do? And that, I know. And the next thing, the next book, this is actually going quite well, actually, but that's not to say the next thing couldn't be couldn't flop, but I've sort of got the bug now, so I believe I will, but I'm not 100% sure yet. Very busy now with all the publicity around the book and all. Like I said, it's just out. But in the next couple of weeks, as that starts to abate, I'll give serious consideration to what I'm going to do next.
Now, is there any buzz in regards to they're going to maybe do because you had mentioned earlier there were people in the film industry that were interested in the book?
Yeah, there's I can't name names, obviously, for the confidentiality, but there's at least 3, and that's before the book even came out. I don't know how they found out about it, and one of them is a Oscar-winning producer.
Oh, wow!
Very strong interest. Kind of phoning a couple of times a week, and not me, the publishers. So I'm letting them handle it.
Yeah.
The only thing that worries me about a book is, I think I'm told, if you kind of sell the film rights, you kind of sell your story, and they can change it and they can do stuff in it that I wouldn't maybe appreciate. But we'll see how it goes. But to answer your question, yes, there's actually quite strong interest.
You got somebody who's going to play you?
Danny DeVito. I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Actually, that's a good one. That's a good answer. No, I just want to check to see if anybody, perhaps we have any questions that, Danny, do you know if we have any questions about?
We haven't at this time. If anyone would like to raise their hand, we'd take a few questions. We remind everybody that there's many options to buy the book. If you're using Amazon, use Amazon Smile. We have a link in the chat for Amazon Smile. We will also promote that on our follow-up. We do have one question that is on our typed questions here from Martin Galvin, and he'd like to ask, in the book you mentioned that your arrest on the Marita Ann came a day or two before the monument was being dedicated to Roger Casement for bringing weapons. Any comments on that, John?
That's right. We were arrested by the Irish Navy and handled quite roughly by them. Much more roughly than was warranted. And the irony of it is that the very next day, the Irish Navy were the colour party, an honour guard, unveiling a statue to the gun runner Roger Casement, who was bringing guns into the same area we were going to in pursuit of the same political objective and to fight the same enemy. So it just goes to show there that things flagged up in Irish history, the contradictions in that, arresting us, Irish Republicans bringing in weapons one night, and the next day they're honouring Irish Republican gun runners. It's ridiculous. But the Irish Navy weren't stopping British guns coming into Ireland to arm the British Army, to arm loyalist death squads run by RUC Special Branch and British military intelligence. But that's it. That's the contradiction of history. And until we have full freedom in Ireland, you're always going to get this. You're always going to get these contradictions. Some people, the South would tell you that it's a subversive delusion that we have in it. Well, I think it was very strange when I was in the North years ago when the Troubles were on. And you could listen to Irish radio talking about how Ireland achieved its independence and when Ireland got its independence. And you're looking out the window at armed British troops all over the place in Ireland, and it's just amazing how people can convince themselves of almost anything if they have to, if they need to.
Well, and it's very similar to the relationship the United States has with the UK, which is important in a lot of factors. But I think sometimes we forget that we went through the same struggle founding our country as Ireland did, which began long before ours did, and really got the republic, just 100 years ago, just roughly 100 years ago. We're a little older, but maybe the big brother, big sister to Ireland, but we went through the same thing, and just had a little bit further distance between us.
Absolutely, and it's important to remember too. I mean, America had many of the same problems. I mean, there was a huge number of American loyalists. 20,000 Americans joined British Army units to fight George Washington and the rebels. So, things are complicated in every situation. It's never just black and white. But thankfully for George Washington and his men, they pulled through. Every man who signed the American Declaration of Independence would have been hanged if they hadn't. In Ireland, they didn't. The 7 men who signed the Irish Proclamation, they were all executed. So there's many similarities.
Another question from Mark Barrett asked, he said, great book, he finished it yesterday. Do you think the British had agents on the Army Council? And do you think with a different military strategy the campaign could have succeeded, or was the conclusion inevitable?
To answer the question, I believe the British had agents at a very high level, very, very high level. Like we know, for example, that Freddie Scappaticci, who was the head of Irish security, was a long-term British agent. And, I believe that was only the tip of the iceberg. As far as a different military strategy is concerned, you need 3 things to win a war or to have a hope of winning. You need the skill, the capacity, and the motivation. Right? Now, as far as I'm concerned, we eventually got the capacity to fight an enhanced war against the British in the mid to late 80s. But it seemed to be used more as negotiating capital in talks with the British rather than as the sinews of war that we needed to pursue the struggle where a lot of us wanted to go. Because you see, the struggle was always going to end in negotiations. Nobody in their right mind ever believed we were going to beat the British Army into the Irish Sea. But those negotiations had to have the Irish Republic on the table. And when the Good Friday Agreement was signed up to, the Irish Republic was not on the table, right? It was absolutely not on the table. There was an internal settlement on British terms with a notional thing about a future United Ireland, but a United Ireland that would retain the sectarian dynamic between Catholic and Protestant if ever came in, and an institutional link with the royal family. And so to answer the question, basically, do I believe we could have got to a better place militarily? I absolutely believe that. But the thing is, you see, when the British prepare for talks, they do what they always did. They set the table, and there's only 1 or 2 items in the menu. And the Irish Republic was not on the menu. The Irish Republic was not up for discussion. Same thing happened in the Anglo-Irish treaty negotiations. The British brought in partition in 1920 before the negotiations took part in 1921. So Ireland was already partitioned before the negotiations even took place. So what the Brits basically want to do is get Republicans into talks, but keep the Irish Republic out. Because no matter how many times you're going to hear they want out. Ireland is the back door. It always has been. They have major strategic interest in keeping influence in Ireland, and they're going to do that. That's the job. The job of their intelligence and security services is to maintain maximum influence in Ireland. Minimum footprint, but maximum influence.
Well, John, I want to thank you on behalf of the Ancient Order of Hibernians for your time.
Thank you.
We are the largest Irish organization in America, and we have many members of the Ladies Ancient Order Hibernians listening today as well. They're the largest ladies Irish organization in America, and we want to remind all of our friends and all of our guests to purchase the book. I was excited. I told you earlier I went to my division meeting, and the guys had bought a couple copies of the book, and we're passing them around, and we'd encourage everyone to buy. I'd invite Tim for his closing comments, and then John will give you an opportunity for closing comments, and we'll thank everybody for joining us. Tim?
John, thank you so much for joining us today. I think it's, like I said about the book, it's a fantastic read. It's a real page turner. It's a fascinating story, and in between your dedication and the storytelling is just wonderful. So I want to thank you very much for joining us today. And again, to reiterate Danny's point of view, the book, you gotta read it. And I think for the publisher's sake and for John's sake, don't take it out of the library, buy it.
Well, thank you very much. And I really appreciate the opportunity to meet with you and to talk about the book. And it means a lot to me. And there's the strongest link and affection between Ireland and America. And it goes way back. And long may it continue.
Yeah, very good. Yep.
Thank you, John. And when that next book comes out, we will obviously have you back. We want to thank Martin Galvin, our chairman of Freedom for Ireland, for helping us arrange this call today. And as we move forward, we look forward to many more Hibernian Talks with Tim Noonan. Thank you all. God bless.